Okay, we're live right now. Yes, we're live right now. Um, Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Performance Tools LinkedIn Live with Adedoyin. I appreciate your time, and we're sorry we're just a few minutes behind time. We're sorry about that. So today, I have a thought leader, a leadership and change management thought leader with me that will be reflecting on the concept of leading change in this period. So I have Dr. John Kotter with me, Dr. John Paul Kotter with me. So I'll bring him in to talk a little bit about himself in a moment. Okay. So, but please, wherever you are or wherever you may be, I'm streaming live from Lagos, Nigeria. So wherever you may be, please signify in the comment section. Let's know where you are watching from. If you are from anywhere you are from, please just let us know. Then also, please, if it's possible to tag other people, tag someone, please go ahead. Please go ahead and do that in the comment section. So please just do that so that we'll know where you are watching from. Once again, thank you so much for signing on to this LinkedIn Live. So, Dr. Koda, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure there are a couple of people, there are quite a number of people that are watching us from all over the world. So maybe in just in just 1 minute, you may want to introduce yourself. I know that you need no introduction, so to say. But for those who don't even know who John Kotter is, please, I'd like you to introduce yourself before we take a deep dive into today's session. Thank you, Dr. Kotter.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being with you today. It really is. I've been throughout my career on the faculty at Harvard Business School. My primary research and writing interests have been in how we collectively cope with an increasingly fast-moving, volatile, uncertain, difficult world. A decade ago, I started an advisory firm to try to take these ideas, this kind of emerging science of change, if you will, and build a cadre of people who could help others besides myself, which has been a great adventure. And I've published 20 or 21 books, I'm not sure, but the next one comes out in about a month.
Yes.
And it's called Change, literally. And it has a subtitle, something along the lines of how organizations create hard to imagine results despite volatile and uncertain times. And it's a pleasure, as I said, to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kotter. I can remember this is the second time we'll be having a conversation like this. In 2016, when I came to you, that was shortly when my country, we had a change in government. A new party took over, and the new party came on the mantra of change. And of course, I was trying to look at, okay, can we tool these people? Can we help them get the right skill in managing change? Remember, I came to you. That was when we had the first conversation, yes, on this kind of concept. Even though I was trying to test the possibility of applying your methodology on the country at the country level. So that was why we had that discussion. But today we're looking at it from organizational perspective, most especially in this challenging time that we're in right now. And it would be good to start this way, Dr. Kotter. As many people will agree with me here today, that we live in a very challenging world. And of course, change is very imperative. I mean, transformation is very important right now. But looking at the horizon, talking to people, the effect of the pandemic and all of that. But if we evaluate very well, and most importantly, I'd like to go back to your seminar paper in 1995. Yes, 1995. Then when you published Leading Change in 1996, there's a statement that you made that about 30% of change initiatives actually get to be successful. About 70% don't get to be successful. So many books, so many seminars, so many, other change management tools have been created. People go for seminars, people get skilled around change management. But what we have seen, because as a consultant, I'm a management consultant, and I've led a couple of change management programs in the past. But talking to people, even reading some of the top journals and all of that, what we have seen is that the situation is not improving. Most change programs, transformational programs, still don't record success, as it were. So, as the father of change management, what could be the reason for this situation? We can start from there so that we proceed. Thank you.
Well, it's a good question. And the observation I would agree with. In terms of the results, the successes of organizations, private and public, in trying to make the kinds of changes they need to make to adapt to the world that we live in. The track record today is not that different than it was 30 years ago. But that does not mean that we have learned nothing and we're not applying what we're learning over the past 30 years. What it means is that the rate of change, the amount of change, the volatility, the uncertainty that it's creating has been steadily going up during that period of time. And it's been going up faster than our skills and abilities that are aimed at dealing with it. Or in other words, we are actually better at dealing with a changing environment and adapting and being agile than we were 10 years ago, and we were better 10 years ago than 20 or 30 years ago. But even faster than our upskilling, as it were, even faster than our learning, the world has been exceeding that. So the gap between what organizations do in terms of being agile and adapting to technology, globalization, and all kinds of other factors, that gap has not gone down. And as a matter of fact, for some places, it's grown, which is a very frustrating problem. But it is something that we have to attend to, because there's no evidence whatsoever that this increasing speed, this increasing amount of change is going to suddenly stop and level off or go down. All the data suggests that it will just increase. It doesn't do it in a smooth X% every year. You get spikes like we got with a COVID year, in which some things happened very surprisingly and required movement on an organizational part that was especially quick. But the trend is very, very clear, and it's just that we're going to be facing more of this. So we have got to get better. And if there is any good news, it is we really have learned a lot over the last 30 or 40 years about why people and why organizations struggle with change, why governments struggle with change, why businesses struggle with change. And we are increasingly learning what we need to do in terms of concrete action, concrete playbooks to deal with this. It's just that knowledge is not widely known right now, and it's not widely applied. That has got to, for everybody's sake, your sake, my sake, change.
Wow, that's wonderful. So from this now, my understanding is that there's a gap between the rate of change, the rate at which change is occurring, change is happening, and also these necessary skills for people to be able to carry out change in a better way. Am I correct?
That is correct. There is a gap, and it has not been shrinking. If anything, it's been even growing a little bit.
Okay, that's great, sir. One of your model, the 8-stage change management model. I'd like us to take a look at it. I love the your answer. In fact, that takes me to the second question. And please, Prof, please permit me to share my screen. I just want people to be able to see it better, so that I'll share my screen in a moment. I want people to be able to see it and understand it better. Okay. Just 1 minute. I'm doing that. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes, this is what we have here right now. A minute, please. Okay. Yes, we have it here right now. The Kotter's eight-stage change management model. I want to ask a question around this. So, because of the challenging time that we are in right now, because of the COVID pandemic, what assumptions now underlie this methodology? We came from we came from or we are coming from the conversation of the fact that change is happening faster right now, but people do not have the necessary skill, or people have not built the skill that can measure up to to the occurring change. If we look at this eight-stage change management model, what has changed as a result of the challenging situation that we're in right now? We can take a look at it together, Dr. Kotter.
The fundamental difference between when we first found this pattern of kind of 8 steps associated with the most successful organizational change efforts and today is that because the world is moving faster, ever faster, and more volatilely with more uncertainty, there was a time when organizations would have small incremental changes, of course, going on all the time, but major changes didn't occur that often. And the best ones, when they did, would, in a sense, take their toolkit of these eight steps kind of out of the closet, if you will, and work their way through them, do it well, achieve success. Today, there is just so much going on that organizations have multiple transformations happening at the same time. And so all of these steps, in a sense, never go away. They don't just come, get applied 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then be put away for another few years until we get around to changing something else. They're in play all the time. That is to say, there's an effort to keep a sense of urgency up around both threats and opportunities all the time. There are various networked organizations, guiding coalitions focusing on certain strategic initiatives all the time. There's communication, there's an effort to clarify and articulate the direction the organization is trying to move to adapt to a changing world all the time. The communication about that to get people to understand it and buy into it is going on all the time. So from a kind of a part-time activity that occurs occasionally, this is becoming much more of a all the time activity at all levels that's needed to deal with this increasingly fast moving world.
Great, great, great. I also want to like to refer to a statement made by Gary Hamel, because the concern basically is around the change that is occurring and occurring so fast. I'll quote him right now. Gary Hamel said, "The most profound business challenge we face today is how to build organizations that can change as fast as change itself. So I know you talked a lot about, in fact, you even wrote another book, A Sense of Urgency, on this. Uh, there are two questions I would like to ask Dr. Kotter. One, how do we build an agile organization in this changing time, considering the fact that because when we look at the COVID, when it started, virtually every body, organizations, businesses, we have to be working from home. So now, how do we build that agile organization?
I have called what we have found in our research is that an organization that can not only handle the daily routine and do it reliably and efficiently, but can be adaptable and agile enough to win in the sort of world that we're experiencing right now, has, in a sense, two operating systems, not one. The one we're all familiar with, it's a hierarchy of jobs. Um, it's driven by managerial processes like planning systems and budgeting systems and staffing systems and metrics and control systems. Um, the most successful organizations in dealing with change are building in parallel with that a second operating system that is aimed directly at the change issues, not just the doing what we know how to do and we have to do every day, but the pushing us into the future problem. And that is organized not as a hierarchy, but as a network. I call a coalition of people across the organization, across the various silos, et cetera, et cetera. What they do is much more leadership type behavior than management. It's less planning and organizing and budgeting and staffing and controlling and reviewing metrics. And it's much more uh, uh, creating a vision of the future, getting as many people aligned to that and buy into that as possible, and then creating conditions where they are empowered to act, to provide leadership in their sphere of influence against that North Star vision to drive change and to drive the organization into the future. Now, I'm not talking about two different organizations, one staffed with kind of people who handle the routine and one staffed with people who handle change. Just one organization, and it's a subset of the regular employee base that works in the network organization to handle the uh, major change initiatives. Um, and they're not appointed either. We find that in the best cases, uh, the communication and the way that senior management talks about the future and the opportunities um, begins to attract people's attention. And over time, more and more people essentially volunteer with excitement to wanting to build something that is good for them, their careers, the organization, and the community over time. So you build a kind of a volunteer army that attacks using leadership type behaviors much more than management behaviors. The key developing and then executing the key strategic initiatives that are needed to produce the future. And those initiatives could be just developing a new strategy and executing it well. A lot of the key strategic initiatives these days are digital, digital transformation. They could be restructuring, but restructuring in a way that doesn't just kill morale, kill innovation, and slow you down relative to the competition. They could be cultural change. Culture is going to become an increasingly important issue because it can facilitate or it can drag you back and hold you into the past. It could be the implementation of mergers and acquisitions, especially the integration part of that, is a huge strategic change challenge that can move people into the future if it's done well. Or it could be agile, literally the scaled agile software development technologies, or even social change that goes beyond a single organization that involves government and a private industry, et cetera. All of those types of changes happen better, faster, with more results in this dual system where you've got management and leadership, hierarchy and networks, where you've got people who have jobs that they realize they have to do, and people who are taking on tasks because they want to do it and they get to do it. Where you've got very good management, but you've also got a lot more leadership from a lot more people providing the energy, the vision, and the direction to deal with a rapidly changing environment. And where you've got not only a lot of brain power being applied to the problems, but you've also got a lot of energy coming from passion and from people's hearts and people's deep beliefs that this is the right thing to do for them, their group, their organization, and their society.
Great, great, great. Okay, so now you suggested that it's possible to build a dual system. I mean, because not only the hierarchy that will work going forward, also the agile organization and organizations going forward will need to consider this agile system. But from this, Dr. Kotter, something just struck me right now, based on what you've just said. Most of the time, employees often get dissatisfied with change programs, cultural programs, reorganization, re-engineering, and all of that. Could we say that most times the issues lie with leadership and culture, the existing culture within the organization?
Oh, for sure. Without sufficient leadership on this from the top, what you get is an approach to change which doesn't quite either scares or enrages or demoralizes employees. It's not at all unusual for people to feel like They're not a part of this. They're just being pushed around for somebody else's benefit. They don't see the point of the changes. They don't understand what the implications are for them, and they worry that the implications could be bad. Now, all of that is unnecessary. If senior management goes about the process correctly and really does create a sense of urgency around opportunity, not just threat, not just burning platforms. If senior management really does encourage and create network structures and doesn't squash them, if senior management really does empower people around the boundaries of some sense of where they're trying to drive things and allow them to do more than just do their job, but to initiate things that are consistent with the change and get results and celebrate those results. All of that can make a huge difference. And on the culture piece, the problem is that the typical culture that evolves around modern organizations is very mechanical. It's not human per se. It's very managerial, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need competent managerial processes to make sure that things don't go off track. You run out of money, you lose your customers because you disappoint them. But you need so much more leadership, and that has to be encouraged by the culture itself. When we did a study a number of years ago of corporate culture, we found the most outstanding firms in something like a dozen industries all had cultures that encouraged people up and down the hierarchy to be on the lookout for changes around them and encouraged them to take action when they saw a change to satisfy either a customer or their owners or their fellow employees, or if they were geographically bound, their communities. So culture is very important, and we're going to need more people in leadership positions that understand what it takes from them to produce change, cultures that support that, and most of all, just more leadership from more people.
Great. That's wonderful, Dr. Kotter. So is it possible for us to, because I want us to get a bit granular kind of, is it possible for us to let us know, maybe one, I mean, because of the time, one case study of a client of Kotter International who had a problem around change issue or around managing change. What was the problem? How did Kotter International came in? Then what was the result that the client got at the end of the day?
Well, I could tell you stories all day and all night. So
I know.
picking one. Well, I just talked about this yesterday to somebody, to a colleague of mine, reminding them we a very large professional association approached us a number of years ago. A new president basically said, our profession is changing, and this association is supposed to be a force to help our individual members understand how their world is changing and what they need to do about it. We're supposed to help colleges and universities that train people in our profession to evolve into the future. And this person said, our governance structure of the association is such that it makes it almost impossible for us to change anything. We're still doing things the way we did back in the 1960s. And I remember one of our people said, well, how long have you been trying to change your governance structure? And there was this silence on the other end of the phone, or I think it was on the phone. And finally, somebody said, about 25 years. And anyway, we went in and we showed them a different way to go about this, which started off with clarifying what the issue was, why this was such a huge issue, why changing the governance structure could be a great opportunity for the individual members and for their organizations and for society. They put together a big plan for kind of communicating that out, for encouraging people to take steps to organize for the annual meeting in a totally different way than they'd done before. They encourage not just 2 or 3 people, but dozens and dozens of people to come up with ideas for the annual meeting that would build up to creating a mindset in which people would vote for a change in their governance structure. And in less than 1 year, they did change that governance structure. And I can still remember the president of the association telling me that if I had told him, and I didn't, when we had first met, that after, quote, 25 years of trying to change this and failing, they could in 1 year make that leap, make that change and get on with it into the future. He said, I wouldn't have believed you. And yet they did it. We're seeing more and more digital transformations where people are bogged down, they're spending too much money, it's taking too much time, and in which they can start making much faster progress in literally 90 days. We've seen we worked with a company that did a merger, creating a huge business. And the CEO was rightly concerned that the merger would take forever to kind of integrate because the two sales forces had been fighting each other for customers for decades. So they thought of themselves as the enemy. And suddenly the enemy had to collaborate and work together and be innovative. And again, we just went in and applied the emerging science of change, if you will. And in less than 12 months, they had a new sales culture, an integrated sales organization that actually was achieving some innovation and increases in certain market shares that nobody, when we first approached them, would have said was possible, given their historical experiences. Now, again, I could go on and on and on, but this notion of results that are hard to believe. Change is so often seen as something that's bad. Change can be wonderful because it breaks things open, it offers new opportunities, and it's our job to take advantage of those opportunities. And the people that are achieving results that are quite extraordinary.
Hmm. Great. Someone said there that they know Dr. Kotter to be a storyteller, that you can go on and on and on and on and on. That's a good one. I mean, even of course, I noticed now that you do more of fable with your book. I mean, I have the two here. Our iceberg is melting. A wonderful book, wonderful book, wonderful book. Then also, that's not how we do it here. It's also a wonderful, it's also a very wonderful book. But I have a question. So someone sent, I mean, some people sent in a quite number of questions, but I just want us to look at two. Then we'll call it a day. I have a question here. Someone is asking this question that should organization direct much of their attentions now to the outside world more than the internal matters? That's a question.
Okay. Well, I think you can't ignore the inside, if you will,
True,
obviously, but
true. Mm,
organizations can easily turn
mm,
inward and pay far less attention to what's going on around them than they should. And I
mm,
suspect that for the majority of governments and private companies and nonprofits, the ratio of top management's attention to the inside versus the outside, and the outside being more than just customers, but suppliers, communities, uh, um, places that are um, pushing for technological and making technological advances that are relevant to them.
mm,
Um, that the average organization uh, has a culture that doesn't necessarily encourage uh, frontline employees, middle management in particular, or senior management to pay as much attention to the outside as it should. And that is a kind of change that we've seen, we know people can make,
mm,
but it's a big change. It's a big change in how people think and
mm,
where they direct their attention and how they act.
mm,
Uh, but in an increasingly fast moving world, it's necessary.
mm. It's necessary. Okay. Okay, that's fine. I have another question here. This person is asking, how do you manage the expectations of various constituencies that have interest in an organization's activities, and there's so much pressure to initiate the change? Maybe someone trying to initiate change, but you have various constituencies, and these constituencies, various stakeholders, they are not seeing this change from your own angle. How do you manage this situation? That's a question from
Well,
another. Mm,
sure. I just talked to somebody yesterday. This is a guy that runs a pretty big business.
mm,
And um, I had learned recently that uh, the people who are that study his industry, um, for the most part, think that he is the industry leader in terms of innovation, in terms of doing um, new things.
mm,
Um, and he emphasized, most of all in our telephone conversation yesterday, the importance of having what he called a North Star,
mm.
what we would call a kind
Focus.
of a statement of opportunity or a vision
Mm,
that encompasses more than the narrow interests
mm,
of just the senior management or just the owners, but incorporates the interests of all of the constituencies that interact with an organization. Now, it's easier to come up with a goal or a direction that is just trying to satisfy one small group than a bunch of groups. But this is what great leaders have done throughout history. They have thought bigger, and they have found ways to talk about movement into the future that has something legitimately in it for all of the key players, not just some. And they recognize the importance of finding ways to communicate that through action and words to all of those constituencies. People who too often who do such things as stakeholder analyses are focused more on how do we somehow convince this group, what kind of language and messaging do we use to convince this group that what we want is good for them, as opposed to thinking what is good for them, as well as us, as well as the world. And that's a significant difference. And this guy that I was talking to yesterday, he really does have a way of talking about a North Star, a way of talking about where their business is trying to go, which it was easy for me to see how no matter who you are, if you're a lower level employee, mid-level, senior, if you're a customer, if you're a supplier, how anybody could kind of relate to that and think these guys are really sharp, and I want to help them, as opposed to I want to block them.
That's great. That's great. I mean, there are several questions, but I just want us to. I mean, so someone is asking here if you could change one characteristics of today's leaders to enable them lead change in an agile world. What would you change? That if you could change one characteristic of today's leaders to enable them lead change, saying that in my organization, things are not working as it should be. Leaders are not seeing the threats within the environment. Now saying that if you could change one characteristics of today's leaders to enable them lead change in an agile, what would you change? That's interesting.
Yeah. I had, starting, I don't know, a decade or two ago, I can remember the first, and I think it was a newspaper reporter that had called me, and he was writing a story about the future of leadership inside companies. And he was asking, what are the characteristics of the 21st century leader? And I think what he expected as an answer is, for example, well, they need to be more, have more of a global mindset, or they need to be more technologically sophisticated, or they need to be, but something concrete like this. And I remember my answer because it's still my answer. What we need more of from leaders is leadership. I mean, that's it. And leadership that encourages and understands that the smartest CEO and the smartest executive committee in the world can't do it. There's just too many people, too much changing. It's too complex. They need a lot more people helping both manage the firm and provide the energy and the leadership to help it transform their business into a winning future. So, what kind of leadership do we need? What characteristics we need? More leadership. That's what we need. More.
More leadership. So, can we more leadership? I know, but what kind of leadership do we need? Can we attach a name to it?
Well, I don't know. Leadership is the correct name. It's more people that not only spend their time worrying about putting together operating plans and budgets, overseeing meetings to see if things are on track, communicating down hierarchies, staffing jobs, looking at metrics and dashboards, and all the stuff that is essential to keep, as we say, the trains running on time. We need people who know something about vision and alignment and buy-in and motivation and inspiration and empowerment, and are willing to take the time to do that, because that's increasingly an essential part of their job in a world that is not static, that's moving faster and faster and changing more and more.
So, Dr. Kotter, I have a question here, and it's very important that we look at it. Someone is asking here that what prompted you to tell your story into, say, like Animal Kingdom? They're very relatable.
Yes, we're talking about two of my books. One is called Our Iceberg is Melting, and the other,
Yes,
that's not. So one involves emperor penguins, and the other is meerkats in
exactly.
Africa.
Yes.
Somewhere along the line, in one of the assignments we were working on, it occurred to me that the reason they were making so much progress, and they were just making hard to believe progress, was that I bumped into a guy literally at a coffee station during a break at a meeting. And he was dressed such that it was clear he wasn't a manager. He was some kind of either technician or a lower level employee. And he struck up a conversation, and I ended up missing the next part of the meeting. We ended up talking for at least 15 minutes, if not a half an hour. And what I saw with this lower level employee was an understanding of what was happening in the firm in terms of trying to take it into the future, in terms of the change initiatives they had going on, in terms of the strategic initiatives. In terms of the kind of stuff that I study, I found an understanding that you just wouldn't ordinarily ever expect from a lower level employee. And I asked him somewhere near the end of the conversation if he had read any of my books, and he said something like, "Oh, you're an author," which is to say he had not read any of my books. And I went back and I talked to some of my colleagues, and I said, we need to write some things that anybody would want to read. That doesn't sound like intimidating, management speak. And we came upon the idea of what people have been doing for millennium, which is telling stories, and one particular type of story, which is the fable. And it was a colleague of mine from Germany who came up with the idea of emperor penguins and an iceberg that's melting. He also came up with the idea of using meerkats in a particular story there. And incredibly, those books do get read by just about anybody. I've gotten emails where somebody has written me to tell me that he enjoyed the book, and how he read it is he read it during the night, putting his children to bed. He read it to his children. He was reading one of my books. This is from a Harvard professor to 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. Now, that I'm very proud of. That you can take what people seem to think is incredibly complex and can nevertheless write it in a way that people will want to read it no matter who they are, and can absorb and learn something from it and apply it. I mean, that's fantastic. I feel privileged.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you can see. Okay, I mean, we're almost done, Dr. Kotter. Maybe before we finally finish, would you like to share something about you that will most surprise people? You are an old citizen. Is there anything you would like to share about you that will most surprise people?
Well, that's a good question. What would most surprise people? uh, well, right now, I'm in. No, that wouldn't surprise people. I I have spent my life around highly educated people as colleagues, and I have spent my life as an educator dealing with executive students and MBA students, not even undergraduates, at a prestigious institution. But I must admit, and this relates to the last thing we were talking about, I get more of a kick out of people who are unlikely suspects, who aren't necessarily the best educated, who certainly haven't been around elite institutions, and are sometimes very young, at them picking up something that I've written about and have done it to their benefit and the benefits of their family or their friends. I get more pleasure out of that than I do often watching a CEO of a major corporation do something a little bit better. Not that I don't love that. I think one of the highlights of my time at Harvard is when a person on our food services came up to me once. This is a guy with an accent from somewhere in Europe. So he's an immigrant, and he was older, and his job is just moving food around. Who came up to me one day and said, "Excuse me, sir." And I said, "Hi, how are you?" And he introduced himself, and he said, I just read the Iceberg book.
Hmm.
And I said, really? And he
Hmm.
said, yes. And he said, he points to his head and he says, it makes you think.
Hmm.
And he says, thank you very much. And he
Hmm.
smiled and he turned around and walked away to help somebody get some coffee.
Hmm.
That made my week.
Wow. 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 That's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned that there's a book you're writing. Of course, I even have the book here. Let me project it. Let me project it so that people can see it. Let me share my screen so that people can see the book. Um, yes, this is the book. So Dr. Kotter, what should people expect from this? From what should your readers expect from this book? It's coming out in June, I think June 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
What should we expect? Yes, what should people expect from this? Kotter is synonymous with change. So what should we expect from this new book?
This is based on the latest research, and it incorporates for the first time the what I think are the most important insights from what is generally called brain science, which is the study of the human mind and our hardwiring, if you will. It's the scientific study of what we've
Mm,
traditionally called human nature. And this, as it
mm,
turns out, has phenomenal implications for why people both resist change and why they sometimes get in there and lead change and create incredible results. And
mm,
it's the first time I've ever written about this. It's also the first time that I've ever kind of carved change down into its basic um, business forms. That is to
mm,
say, strategy, execution, digital transformation, culture change, mergers and acquisitions, agile, etc., and looked at specifically that sort of initiative and why, what the norm is today, and the players that are doing it a new way and much more effectively, what they do. So it's full of stories, mostly from our consulting practice. Um,
mm,
and it was a fun book to write. And I hope greatly that
mm,
it will help a lot of people.
mm. Wow, that's awesome. So is it also like a fable? Is it fable like? Because someone is asking that when are you writing your is any of your is your book coming as a fable again?
Yeah, yeah. And it will be, like I said, like you said, its publication date is June 2nd.
June 2nd. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kotter. This is a great honor. It's a great honor, and I must thank you for your time. Thank you for honoring me. I appreciate that. This is the second time, and I believe that when I still come back to you, maybe in a few years to come, you will still honor my invitation.
It's a pleasure. The work you do is important, and therefore I'm delighted uh, to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kotter. Thank you, listener. That's the end of the show today. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your support. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kotter.
Bye bye now.
Bye. Bye-bye.